Hey everyone, this is John from Fender, and I'm here with Rick from the Fender Amp team. And in this video, we're taking a look at the Fender ToneMaster amp series, and in particular, the Fender Twin Reverb. So Rick, I'll let you take us through the amp and what makes it so special and different from the original 65 or reissue 65.
Yeah, so the ToneMasters are 3 years in the making. They're the culmination of a lot of things that we've learned as far as doing digital amps. We started doing digital amps a long time ago. Mustangs have been extremely popular, champions, but we decided to see what we could do as far as raising the bar with what you can do with a digital amp.
Right.
So the goal was to recreate in every way, shape, and form a twin reverb, every nuance, every detail, but do it in the digital realm so that you've got this amazing sound that doesn't use tubes, but feels just like a tube amp.
Oh yeah.
And because this amp is digital, we have the ability to actually add some features for players that we think will be really, really exciting as far as recording and playing live.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to those in a minute. But I think we should just approach the amp like a twin reverb. Take a quick rundown of the features on the front panel, same as a 65, a reissue or a vintage. We have the normal channel, high and low inputs, bright switch, volume, treble, middle, bass, and then over to the vibrato channel, high and low inputs, bright switch again, volume, treble, middle, bass, and then the controls for reverb, as well as the tremolo. So maybe we should get some tones going. In the beginning, you were just using the amp. You had it set about 5, and it was fairly clean. Let's listen to some tones, and then we'll, kind of crank up the volume a little bit. And like a good tube amp, when you crank the volume, it's gonna start to break up a little bit, and we can hear those tones in this amp as well. So let's kind of take it from there, and then we'll see what we got.
Okay, so right now I'm gonna keep the amp the way I had it set up when we were jamming. Volume's at about 4.5 or 5, treble about 7, mid 5, bass 5. Generally 5 or 6 on the tone controls is where a lot of people like to keep it. A sprinkle of reverb on 3, and without the bright switch, this is how it sounds.
So let's crank up the volume a little bit. I'm gonna go from 5 to about 6.5. I'm gonna turn the bass down just a little bit and the reverb down a little bit. Let's hear what that sounds like. And I might change while you're playing, so.
Okay, I'm gonna hit it with the humbucker just to give a little bit of a...
Back off a little bit more on the reverb. I'm gonna crank you up to about 8.5, and then a little bit higher on the treble and bass. Try that.
Something to keep in mind with this is having a twin on 8 that's all tube is bound to make someone deaf. And a lot of people have never heard a twin louder than 5 or 6. So twins do actually break up and distort. Let's give it a shot.
Nice, and I saw that you rolled the volume down on the guitar, so again, it cleans up nicely just as a Fender Twin Reverb would.
That's the thing about this is it's pretty amazing. In the digital realm, we're able to have it so the nuance and the touch sensitivity that guitarists love are packed in this.
Absolutely. All right, we should also demo the reverb, since it's a twin reverb, and the tremolo on the amplifier. So Rick, do you want to walk us through a little bit of the design of the reverb, and then we can get into what it sounds like?
Absolutely. Something that should be mentioned as well is the fact that there's so much processing power that goes into this amplifier to replicate every nuance. It's quad-core processing, which generally is used in a lot of very high-end
Studio quality, so
yeah, studio quality, and also modelers and stuff. And it's important to remember that we're not trying to do a million things. We're trying to do one thing really, really well. But that processing power really helps with the sound and the nuance. But it also has convolution reverb, and that's a studio type of reverb that has been used for a while. They sound amazing. We've been able to use the convolution reverb to replicate the sound of spring reverb, true spring reverb, and it sounds glorious.
All right, so let's listen to the reverb. We'll start at 0 here. I'm going to go with the bright switch on, a little more surfy kind of tone, and then you play, then I'll kind of bring in the reverb as you do.
Okay.
Nice, you can really hear those trails. I kind of expect if I hit it or bump it, I'm going to hear that splash, but it's digital, so you don't hear that, but you get those really beautiful kind of shimmery trails as well.
Yeah, it reacts just like the original spring reverb, which is pretty amazing feat by the R&D team.
Nice. So let's take a listen to the tremolo. Now, same thing, we'll kind of start at, I'm going to take the reverb down just a little bit. Start at 0 or at 1 on the trem, and I'll bring it in as you play. And it goes really well with the reverb as well. Sounds really nice.
Well, we spent a lot of time. We went through a bunch of modern and vintage twin reverbs to find the best tremolo and reverb and use those as templates to make sure that the tone masters sounded amazing.
Yeah, great job, Rick and team, of course. All right, so let's listen to the normal channel before we move on and get into the kind of stealthy features. So I'm just going to literally just pull this out. I'm going to pop over to the normal channel. Now, like a vintage or reissue twin reverb, right? So you don't have the trem or reverb on this channel. This is pretty much just a dry
Correct.
channel, right?
Like the originals, this side doesn't have reverb or tremolo. And because of that in the circuit, while it's the exact same tone stack, it sounds slightly different because you don't have, in the original, the extra tube driving the reverb and the tremolo. So we replicate that in this as well.
Great. All right, so have you plugged in? I'm on the bright channel here. If you play a little bit, then I'll just kind of go through the different tones here. All right, that's a look at the basic features of the amplifier. Now to get into the stealthy features, one being the attenuator. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so twin reverbs are a very loud 85 watts.
Yeah, we're sitting right next to this amp, and it's set to 85, and it is loud.
It is loud. It is very loud in this room, yes.
Yeah.
So that is probably one of the things that when people talk about this amplifier is, well, it's almost too loud for any application. So because we did this in the digital realm, we were able to use Class D power to replicate the 85 watts, but then use a 5-position attenuating switch. So you can go from 85 watts down to 40, down to 22, down to 12, down to 5, down to 1. So when we were playing that with the overdrive earlier, it's only because that we were able to do it at 1 watt
Take it down,
that
yeah.
we could crank it up. Otherwise, we would have been deaf at this point. And
What?
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. All right, so let's run through, maybe I'll just play if you want to go down from 85, down to loud to not so loud, but hopefully I'll still have hearing after this. But so here's 85 watts, full power. We're set to 5 here on the volume.
that is really loud.
That's 85 watts.
All right, we're going down to 40 now.
40 watts.
Twenty-two
22.
watts.
Twelve
watts. 5 watts.
Lastly,
1 watt.
1. Right. So the cool thing is, as I'm playing it, it's all that feel when you play a tube amp, whether it's loud or whatever it is. It doesn't change. I still feel that tube kind of bounce or that feel when you're playing. And you took it down to the 1 watt, and obviously the lower volume, but I still felt that.
Yeah,
And
the one thing you can't replicate is
Yeah.
the speaker push, but the tone is there and the way it feels. That's one of the things that I think was essential to making these amps, is that when you play and you dig in, it feels and responds like a tube amp, which is really, really difficult to do.
Yeah, and sometimes when you have to play at lower volumes, either in your house, studio, whatever it is, you kind of like, oh, it's low, and I can't really get into it, but I still feel like it has that thing, right? And it's still inspiring me to want to play more and not be like, oh, I can't feel it, but what a great feature, yeah.
The thing is, some players that buy this amp because they've heard all the things they love about it, they realize how loud it is, and then they set it at 2 or 3, which for a tube amp isn't really where the sweet spot is. And then they're like, well, this doesn't sound the way I expect.
Yep.
Because of the attenuation, you can bring it up to 4 and 5, and that's where a tube amp or this amp really shines. Bring the attenuation down, and then you get the sound that you want at the volume that you need.
Yeah. So again, like if you're recording at home, your spouse or family, you have to keep it down at like lower listening levels. So you can take it to that sweet spot and beyond. And at 1 or 5, it's manageable. It's not ear shattering, and you can put a microphone in front of it and record and get those tones at the lower level, which is great.
The other nice thing is you can take this to a gig, and before the sound man gets upset with you, you can let him know, hey, I can bring this down to an appropriate volume. He'll be happy, and you'll get great tone.
And you kind of touched on a key point there. You said you can take it to a gig. Now, we haven't talked about this yet, but the weight of the amplifier, I believe, is 33 pounds.
Yes.
And what does a reissue or a vintage 65?
It weighs close to double that weight.
Double that weight, yeah. So you can easily take this to a gig, we should say, and without having to, hurt yourself. So
yeah, the nice thing about doing the amplifier digitally again is you're not worrying about transformers and tubes and all the things that make an amp heavy. The other things that help reduce the weight are the fact that it has a solid pine cabinet like the originals, and it has special design Jensen neodymium speakers that replicate the sound of the ceramic ones that come in the reissue. Okay. So you get that feel and that sound from the Jensens, but at a reduced weight. So yeah, you can pretty much take this to the gig and not break your back. It's almost disconcerting when you lift it the first time. If you've ever lifted a twin before, they're usually ridiculously heavy. Yeah. This one you can grab with one hand and make it to the gig without slipping your back.
So we should also talk about the XLR out, right? So again, you can mic up the amp, but you can also take an XLR out, and we have 2 different settings for cabinet IR. So if you want to explain that.
Yeah, so the IRs, for some that maybe don't know about these have been something that a lot of high-end modelers use, impulse responses. We did our own. So we actually took the amplifiers into a studio, used a dynamic mic and a ribbon mic, and got the sound of those amplifiers in that room. And so by using those IRs, you can plug directly in with XLR, and you can either get the dynamic mic or ribbon mic depending on the use. Dynamic's usually great for playing live because it's a little more cutting, a little bit more in the mix. And then with the ribbon mic, you have an extended low end, so it sounds great for recording.
So we're not actually emulating just the sound of a cabinet. It's actually the sound of it's the basically modeling what a microphone, how a microphone reacts to being placed in front of a speaker. So it's kind of emulating that whole entire process.
Exactly. It's not just the
yeah,
speaker. It's the speaker hitting the microphone
Right.
and how that sounds, which is really important because when you're recording, there's something that happens between the two, an interaction that is unique. So yeah, it has 3 positions on the back. It's got position 0, which is actually, if you use this amp and you decide to go into another amplifier that has colorizing tonal qualities, you don't necessarily want the IRs along with that because you're doubling up on the colorization. And then position 1 is the dynamic mic, which I mentioned, and then position 2 is the ribbon mic. Oh, it should also be mentioned that when you go out through the XLR, it does have a ground lift and it has a level control, so you can get the sweet spot when you're going into your own DAW at home or through the PA system. And then if you've got any sort of lighting issues when you play, if you use a Fender guitar and 60 cycle, really helps take care of any of the excess noise when you're playing live.
Nice. All right, let's do a little A-Bing, the actual mics, against the cabinet IR. So we'll start with the dynamic mic, and then we'll go to the dynamic setting, and then we'll do the ribbon, and then the ribbon setting on the IRs.
Okay, why don't we switch over to the position 1 of the IRs and see how that sounds.
Okay. All right, so now the ribbon microphone.
All right, let me switch over to position 2, which is the ribbon mic. The great feature about using the XLR out is you can actually put the amp on standby and then just run it out through the XLR. So that means if you're recording at home, you can do it silently. If you're playing on stage, you need to have a silent stage and use in-ear monitors. It's perfect for that. So all you gotta do is hit standby, light goes to orange.
And nothing out of the speaker.
Nothing on the speaker.
Hopefully you can still hear that. How does it sound with pedals? Well, we actually have a few pedals here. So I have a boost, a distortion pedal, as well as a delay. So why don't we just kind of run through those? So here's the bypass tone, no pedals. Okay, I'm gonna click on the boost. So this is just a clean boost, so you're just adding a little bit of volume and some mass to it and a little bit of hair. Take that off, try some distortion. Add in some delay. All right, thanks for checking out the Fender ToneMaster Twin Reverb, an amazing amplifier, full of tones, loud when you need it, quiet if you need it to be quiet. Lots of great features. I will mention it also includes a 2-button foot switch to control the reverb and tremolo. And I also want to thank Rick for stopping by to tell us more about it.
Absolutely, and if you like what you hear, I suggest you try it out in person. As a guitarist, you really understand what we've done here, and hearing is believing with these.
So for more information on the ToneMaster series, please head over to fender.com. Stay tuned for more videos, and we'll see you soon.